meeting to order for our council budget planning session for January 18th. Thank you everyone for being there in attendance and for making time for this tonight. As you can tell, I'm with you over the phone and actually on the computer, and we'll run this just fine, I believe. For those of you that have been in this session in the past, the department heads and Ryan will do most of the conversing anyway. After a couple of things here, I can mostly step aside and listen just like you all. I wanted to thank staff for everything that you've done to this point, getting this budget here. And I know that it was a little bit of a challenge. And for all of the council members that presented questions to staff in advance of this meeting, thanks for doing that as well. It saved us some time tonight, and it was informative for those of us that were able to capture those answers that Ryan provided this afternoon. So without further ado, can we get a roll call, please?
Harrington?
Here. Here.
Sittig?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Wason?
Here.
Thank you, Tracy. And I hope I didn't have feedback in there. And if not, I'll make sure I mute myself in between conversations here. Was that okay while Tracy was calling roll call?
Yes.
Okay. Item 3 then is the approval of the agenda. It is just as we have it here. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right. Item 4 is the meat of the conversation in our general fund. And I'm largely going to step aside and let Ryan run this item by item with the assistance of the department heads in these agenda items. So Ryan, I'll turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Most of you know the drill here, especially all of those out in the audience. But just as a reminder, we'll go through the general fund as you see it laid out here, category by category. So we'll hit public safety first, and then after I give you a quick rundown of public safety, those department heads are here in the audience and can answer questions that you might have or further explain items that aren't clear in the presentation. So we'll get through each category in the general fund, then we'll roll on to our enterprise funds. Tonight, the focus will really be on the operational piece of the budget. With the exception of our capital equipment. All of our capital equipment will be discussed tonight, and then our follow-up conversation next week, a week from tonight, we'll invite some of the department heads back, the lucky ones that get to talk a little bit more about significant capital projects within their department, more brick and mortar type projects will be that are included and be discussed and ultimately decided on by this group. So with that said, we'll jump right into the general fund and the public safety category. And I'll just go down the line here, and we start out with the police budget. You'll see that, and highlighted this in my memo as well, that the chief is requesting a new lieutenant position. This position was requested last year, and we delayed it. We're at a point where we think this is a pivotal position, and Diane can provide additional detail for you here shortly. She also has a couple vehicles that need to be replaced, and you'll see that in the transfers line item. A new thing this year that you'll also see throughout this document is a placeholder called technology. And what I tried to highlight today in the email was that we're with our new IT director. He's put together a technology replacement program, a pretty nifty one actually, that we're all kind of excited about, that will guide our department heads in making decisions on when technology needs to be upgraded. And so this really isn't what I would describe as new money being spent here. We're just allocating it a different way than we would in previous years. Okay, so that's kind of a highlight of the police department, and as you know, Diane can elaborate on some of those things in more detail. I know there were some questions about some of our CIT training and crisis intervention calls, and we can get into as much of that as you'd like this evening. Moving on, the emergency management budget, you're not seeing much different there. This is our payment to the Johnson County Emergency Management and other related expenses in that fund. The fire department budget, another big one, and that one continues to grow annually as we go from a 100% volunteer department to a hybrid department. And I think it's fair to say that we've made that transition, or I think we've made it and we're continuing to build it. What you're seeing in this budget is a new full-time employee, a firefighter position, and also using some part-time employees to fill some weekend gaps that we still have that we don't have staffing for on site. And I hope you had an opportunity to see the report that Chief Platt's annual report that he developed and put out last week that really shows, I think, a couple things. One, the need to continue to build up staffing, but also the improvements we've made with having people, part-time folks, I should say improvements in response time with part-time folks at the facility. You're seeing a couple other things in this budget, including the technology line item. I see the $66,000 doesn't have a note by it, but this is capital projects that would include the Connex boxes that we talked a little bit about in the email, as well as the annual replacement or upgrade of turnout gear. Excuse me. Now, as I pointed out again in the memo, the fire department is working on a SAFER grant, and our hope is that we could secure some grant funding to immediately bring in 3 full-time employees. If that doesn't happen, this is our fallback position where we're bringing in 1 full-time employee and then expanding that weekend coverage. Building inspection department is status quo. Not many changes there, not really any significant changes. Animal control, you're seeing a capital truck project there. And again, I offered some detail today in that right now we use an old hand-me-down truck from another department. What we're hoping to do is really provide a tool to our employees that respond to these animal control calls with a vehicle that can accommodate animals as well as the equipment that's needed. And Michael can elaborate more on that as well. And I hope you saw the attachment to the email, the photo of what that truck would look like. It's much more sophisticated than your standard half-ton truck. And then lastly, in public safety is traffic safety, and this is where we pay our crossing guards from. So that is a snapshot, and I know we have folks eager in the audience ready to talk more about their specific budgets. So I guess fire away with questions. We'll just go up to the top and start with police.
Hello. How do you guys want to do this?
Aren't you?
Good evening.
Go down the row.
Well, I'm good. Or we could just fire away. Questions. I don't have a specific order.
So the biggest question I had, Chief, and it was answered by Ryan's email this afternoon, was just the breakdown of the 270 increase for personnel. You know, it was obvious that wasn't for one position, but he he declared out what all of those were for the increases, so that was very helpful. Just detail, I know you talked last year about some of the ideas that you had for the new lieutenant position, but what's this really going to bring for you and your staff?
So this is really, it is an administrative level position, and really it'll be, second in command. So right now it's the chief, and then I have the one patrol lieutenant. It's great when we're both there. It's great when everything is working well, but then we found when COVID, when somebody's out of the office, when the other person is gone, we really need that second level of command that's going to be there, that's going to be around. So that's executive level, top wide, that's really going to help us out. With this position, it's, and again, administrative, they're going to be overseeing the investigations, evidence, and then also records. So right now, that is divided between multiple people that were all overseeing those departments. Now we're going to have one person at the helm that's going to be responsible for that. So the records management piece alone, just for the audits, for the tracking, one-stop shop, I think that's exactly what we want within our department, that we can get information quickly out and back, and it's just not going to have that time delay that we're seeing right now with 3 or 4 people that are trying to manage that. And then also with Barnum study. So we're doing that traffic contact and initiation, and so that person will oversee all the data collection that's going into that. We've done it for a year. It's been very challenging. I spend a majority of my time doing it. Probably not exactly what you need your police chief to be doing.
So now you talked a little bit about some cybersecurity needs and wanting one of your personnel to assist in that, either at the county level or doing more in-house where you're pulling more records off of phones and things like that. Have you been able to do that? Is this going to assist in that also?
So once we fulfill that position, then that person would oversee that officer in that level. So right now we have 3 that are our drug task force, and we have 2 investigators as we continue to build and expand. So, CIT, community outreach officer, the cyber crimes, that's who that's going to be their boss. So now we're starting. We already got 3 people that are there. They don't actually have a direct supervisor. The patrol lieutenant has done a fantastic job overseeing what they're doing, but I'm burning him out. He's going by both sides. So yes, so once we bring on that admin lieutenant, we'd hope to add somebody. I'd love, ideally, to add somebody to the Johnson County team, because I think that's collectively would be much better than having an individual in-house in North Liberty.
That's all I had.
That was my question.
Yep.
So.
Chief, I just had a question about crisis intervention. I know there have been discussions about that in the past, and you don't feel like there's a need at this point for a dedicated staff person for that particular duty. But I guess, what is the tipping point for that?
That's a great question. I would say the need is there, but we want that person to be able to be busy and actually have a job to do, and justifying, maybe two calls a week. I can't justify that at this point, so we are utilizing the resources in Johnson County to do that. I know response time has been really important for us, that it's just been delayed. Is there any way that we can speed that up? And so we've been in communication with community, if possible, instead of parking the cars on the south side of Iowa City, do they want to park a response vehicle at North Liberty PD? Their response units would come to North Liberty, and then they could be able to go out from there. So we're trying to decrease that response time, trying to be as much as a community partner as possible. But that's a great question. How many calls do we have? If we have 400 calls, could I keep somebody busy? I could, especially with the follow-up. 88 to 100, I don't know what that's going to be.
And I was lucky and I appreciate you showing me around the station. And while we were there, there was a demonstration of some training, virtual reality training type stuff going on. Is that something that, I don't see anything about that in here. Is that something that you're going to be asking for in the future?
No, we've already asked for it, and that was on last year's. And actually, that money that we're using for that is forfeiture money that we received. We can't use it for any line item budgets that we currently have, so that's why we were looking for something that was a little bit better technology that is nowhere else that is available, but we're still in that process of looking. And to spend $65,000 to $90,000, we really want to make sure we do our due diligence to make sure we're getting the best with what we get. So I hope to have something decided by July, and so that money will be already allocated.
That's all I had.
If I could just have a quick follow-up on the CIT and crisis mobile crisis. Can you, I'm sorry, I didn't prep you for this, but any chance you can walk us through how the mobile crisis works when we call them? Can you just
Sure.
kind of explain how that works?
COVID actually has done a great thing for us with that response time. So once they respond, and as it's explained to me, the counselors are coming from all over in Johnson County. So if they have folks that are driving from Swisher downtown to, south side of Iowa City to jump in the cars, there has to be 2 responding when they're coming out to a call in North Liberty. Well, now, of course, with phones, we can get somebody who's the passenger, not driving the car, can actually get on the phone and, interact and kind of maybe start building that rapport. So when they walk in the door, it's not just a blind call. So we're trying to at least minimize the amount of time that we're going to need there as we're doing the handoff, the soft handoff to the next group. So either we need to stay or if we need to go. So that has kind of helped. When COVID was here, it was strictly, everything was through the phone, and it was all mobile outreach. And so now that we're kind of transitioning, we're still trying to utilize that. So we'll ask, can we give you a call?
So we had a significant investment in the new crisis center. Has that paid off for you?
We've utilized it. We attempted to utilize it twice this year, and once we were able to drop somebody off, and the next time it wasn't available, the bed space wasn't there. We expect that to happen, of course, during busy times. Shelter house we've utilized at times, so that is also a component of that. That time and distance is a big deal with everything that the officers have been trained with. They've done a really good job that we're trying to divert people from jail or the hospital. And if they have to be a yes person, and not everybody we deal with is a complete voluntary yes person. So a few of our incidents, it just wasn't a right choice for us.
And if I could just add one more, this is not a question, Diane, but a comment and frankly a compliment, talking about our officers being trained in CIT as well as negotiating. This whole group out here saw a video recently. One of the things we've done a little bit differently after we've gotten together as a group in our meetings after COVID is the first meeting of the month of our staff meeting. We have each department do a little presentation. And when we met with the police department, Diane had an officer come in who had recently negotiated and talked a young lady, and I'll be careful what I say, I understand, from a very life-threatening situation. And I would be willing to bet everyone out here was equally as impressed the skill of this officer and how empathetic and compassionate and successful he was in resolving this situation. It was impressive. So I think we have some good training going on, and we can rely on our guys in those types of situations. And then, of course, we have other tools like the mobile crisis. And I know you're working with Johnson County and our other municipalities on other avenues as well. So. Okay, well, thank you, Chief. We'll move on.
Thanks, Chief.
Actually, Chief, can I ask one quick question? Sorry, Ryan.
Oh, no problem. Forgot you were there. Sorry,
Chief,
Mayor.
we're also going to be talking about social services monies, and the crisis in the community is one of the recipients annually. Is there anything that we can do to help you in that funding request that they might have from us, or an additional ask that we may have of them to support you as you just kind of laid out right now?
The biggest for us is going to be that mobile crisis piece, and that's going to be one, having enough staff, and everybody right now is having a really big issue with keeping staff, and especially volunteers, and how that whole dynamic is going. But I know vehicles and then and staffing are going to be huge. And so if we have the staffing in place, we have strategically placed those response units throughout the county, then I think that's just going to increase our response time and the ability that they're going to respond to these calls a lot quicker. So that would be my request, if we can help.
Okay, thanks. I guess the personnel is going to be up to them, but maybe additional vehicle might be something that we could supplement for them then.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll move on here, and I'm going to skip down to fire unless someone wants to spend some time talking about emergency management. And Chief Platts is in the room this evening.
Evening, Chief.
Questions for the chief?
So are you guys, the command staff, are you still, during the daytime, are you guys still spending quite a bit of time responding?
Quite a bit, yeah.
So we need to get somebody like, so
Yeah,
that you guys can do your,
Yep, this is certainly part of the evolution that we expected. But obviously you saw the call volume that we just ended up having this last year. And we do spend quite a bit of our time during the day running out the door. Some days more than others, obviously. But yeah, it is impactful. So we'll continue to work our staffing plan. One of the main goals of our staffing plan is to secure a crew of 3 people operationally 24/7. And so we just keep chipping away at that year after year.
How many calls were you on this year?
My call volume was just over 600 calls.
That's what you were last year, true?
What's that?
Last year, same,
Yeah, it was just
640?
a little lower, just simply because we ran less calls. But those are calls where maybe I didn't always necessarily go out on the truck. For instance, as an example, middle of the night when we get a call on the interstate and we have 2 part-timers in-house, they wait for that third person. I never know when that third person is going to get there, so a lot of nights I'll come up to the station, and while they're out on the interstate, I'll sit at the station just in case we have another call. So just because I'm not signed to a unit, I'm still on the call.
But 20% of the time you're taking additional calls when another call is kicked out.
Absolutely, and we saw that skyrocket this year. I don't necessarily know what to attribute that to. However, I do know, just speaking with different departments around us, they're all seeing the same thing. It's just getting busier. County ambulances, talked with Fiona today about some of their statistics, and it's just amazing, some of the things they're running into as well. And trying to ramp up and put more people to it and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's just busy all over.
So with the addition of the new full-time staff member, and then you talked about some part-time staff that will be covered by the grant funds. And is the call volume about the same on the weekends, or do you?
Actually, it's interesting because if you watch throughout the year, about halfway through the year, our Sundays were the highest called day. And then all of a sudden we finished the year and trying to think what was the heaviest day of the week. It turned out to be Friday. So it just ebbs and flows a little bit. Summertime is different than the rest of the year, just because people are out doing things. So it's all over the board. It'd be awesome if we could start planning our calls. It would just make this all easy. But yeah. And just I think since you hit on it, Rakisha, we are requesting the grant for 3 full-time people, and then the budget, like Ryan indicated, is our fallback position. Hopefully we don't have to use that. I think there's a lot of reasons why I can go into why we're looking at 3 people, right? A lot of it has to do with that 24/7 coverage. And what we'd like to do is start putting those folks in an operational mode, 24 hours on, 48 hours off. So we'd always have that presence at the station. This person, these 3 people, we'll be looking at them to have some supervisory role as well. They will be accountable for the part-time crew. Right now we have 13 members of the part-time group. And within those 13 members, we have 2 individuals that we put in a leadership role. They take on all of the scheduling, and they do a lot of our communication between administration and the line firefighters. However, as you can imagine, each of those folks work maybe 1 night a week. And so we have a lot of nights where we have 2 part-timers that are of equal rank, sometimes a year on the department, running calls for us. And without any supervision or experience, it's really, there are a lot of times I feel like we're putting them in positions that are pretty unfair, just because they're making some pretty high-level decisions lack of any kind of experience or training. We do our best we can, you know, as far as the training component, but some of these folks have not been on very many calls, especially high-risk calls. So that's something we're dealing with, and I think that's probably one of the biggest elements of the 3 people that we're going to get out of this grant, is that supervision, that consistency, that accountability. So I'm really looking forward to that piece. Not only that, but we had a number of people that walked away from the department these last 2 years, about 13 people. And a lot of them were our more experienced people. And so a lot of the administrative responsibilities like truck maintenance and repairs, some facility stuff, that all walked out the door with some of these more experienced firefighters, some that were officers. And quite frankly, they walked out the door because it's getting too much for them. As Chief Benenga talked about volunteers. It's really hard to see 13 members of our department walk away only to then put more emphasis on the core group of volunteers that we have running a lot of our calls. And my biggest fear is that we're going to get to a point where they're going to walk away. And we truly need them. Even once we get to this point of having a crew of 3 24/7, we still need that volunteer component within the department. I know we've tried to roll up our sleeves and put Band-Aids on this for a number of years. Everybody there has really indicated a desire to figure this out. But we just find ourselves in a situation where it's just too much. And we just know that we have to start paying people to do what we do.
Thank you.
I think the other thing that I will note about the SAFER grant this year, and I just kind of found some of this stuff out today, was that the America Rescue Plan Act, they actually put $200 million in addition into the SAFER grant this year.
Direct to safer?
Direct to SAFER. So we even have there's $560 million this year versus the $360.
Excellent.
So we stand a little bit better chance. So if we're kind of one of those things where if we're going to do it, this would be the year to do it.
What would be that grant for, or how much roughly?
It would pay for 3 firefighters, as we write it, it would pay for 3 firefighters for all payroll costs for 3 years. No matching funds. So year 4, the city would be obligated to take that all over.
So that's probably close to $1 million.
Yep.
But it never should really be a surprise to us with, the plans that have been detailed in the past and that we've seen. And, it's the warning shot and, hey, this is coming with strategic planning. And we've been able to see that. So it really shouldn't be a surprise to our group.
And understanding the workload and responsibilities are only increasing more. And if you had that large amount of individuals leave with the skill set, you want to keep people and not have them burn out so quickly. So, yeah, I agree. Just having that strategic plan, and you've mentioned it before, the need for additional staff.
Yeah, I looked today, and 53% of our pay-per-call firefighters have less than 2 years on their department.
I would just make a point about your comment about burnout, and that includes the chief himself. And he'll give you one of these aw shucks, but I know he was in on Saturday and Sunday, this Saturday and Sunday on calls. It's nonstop for him, and it's equally important for his not only his people but him as well. So.
Made that comment last year. That was the criticism last year at the same time, was 600 calls for you a year is not sustainable. It just isn't. And it's.
Yeah, I turned a pretty interesting age this year, and I can start to tell.
I bet.
40 comes at you quick, doesn't it? Anything else for the chief? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Next up, there's really no change, essentially no change in the building inspection department, but there's Tom. Tom's here. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you if there are any questions.
Good evening.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
As Ryan said, there's no proposed needs. Our staff's doing an excellent job, and I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge them. They're doing a great job, and that's Ben Yoder, Mike Wolf, and Anthony Green, and Kerry Warren staff. They're all doing a great job representing the city.
So you guys have been doing a lot of inspections. I was getting your reports and stuff. I like it when you just kind of show us what's getting built.
Yeah, this year we had a really significant increase in activity and new home starts, and so they've been busy. And then we're also preparing for the changeover of codes to the 2021 code. So we just sent the two guys to the training here in Des Moines. So probably around July we'll be in front of you to adopt a new ordinance.
Revenue generation on par with past years, or have you seen an increase with the number of, with the higher inspections with added revenue?
Yeah, we've bumped that line item up in the revenue column a little bit. So just to, what this document says is in FY21, we actually had a total of $725,000 in permits. We budgeted last year 656, and we're on pace to beat that. So this year, FY23, we're budgeting right at 700,000. Yeah, I suspect we'll get there, no problem. But yeah, we've seen an uptick.
And staff's able to keep up at this point?
They're doing a really good job.
Excellent.
And they're providing excellent service to public. You know, it gets difficult enforcing codes, but they do a really good job to try to educate people and explain why it's needed.
I know I have heard a significant difference in the approach from a variety of different departments in the city with customer service, with being teachers and partners, and I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I know there was some changes that occurred that came with some requests of folks, and from what I'm hearing from business owners in town, that is occurring, and that is much, much appreciated.
Thank you.
And I'd say Tom does a nice job keeping the HBA updated, and I know he presents to them a couple times a year upon their requests. So I think we've built a good relationship there.
Excellent.
Okay, well, we'll move on to animal control. Generally, this is kind of a boring one, but this year we threw a little spice in it by requesting an animal control truck. And Michael can talk a little bit about that, but as he's walking up here, just a little background. Brian and Mayor, I know you were around years ago when we talked with Iowa City and other communities in Johnson County about partnering on the Animal City, Iowa shelter, and that would have been a significant bump in our budget. One that at the time did not look very sustainable, and so we chose to partner with the Cedar Valley Humane Society, and I believe that's worked out well for us, especially from a cost-saving standpoint. But as with anything, we continue to get a few more calls, and Michael is going to talk to you a little bit about why we think this purchase is necessary.
Good evening. So this purchase is just to replace, I believe it's a 2003 vehicle that was collected from another department that we put a topper on and just made work over the years. And primarily my staff and the police department staff are the ones that respond to animal issues, and this piece of equipment would be to give them what they need to respond properly and give the care that's needed to these animals, both collection and taking to Cedar Valley Humane Society.
Is that back end conditioned?
I'm sorry?
Is the back end of it conditioned for the animals, or?
Yeah, so what we've ran into is a number of times is during extreme heat and extreme cold, you're either putting those animals in a squad car or you're putting them in a pickup truck, and things happen when the animals are scared in there. So this gives us the ability to put them in a a carrying unit that can be transported during 90-degree, 100-degree, 20 below, all types of conditions, and then easily cleaned out.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by things? Just kidding.
Is there any equipment that's coming with that purchase? Is that 75 include some of the equipment that you need with catch equipment or retain equipment or anything?
It doesn't. I think the 75 would cover equipment with that. My thought is we take what we have and outfit that vehicle so it's ready to use. It's staged ready to use, whether my staff is on call or if PD needs it in the middle of the night, it's there ready to go with leashes and treats and all the stuff you need to corral them.
Is there any, are we doing any animal control, training or anything like that, or is this just?
We don't currently have anything other than experienced staff training new staff.
Okay. And is the idea to keep the current pickup, or is that going to be sold or traded in, or?
So the current truck is 2-wheel drive, 2002. It's really worth more valuable to. My thought is place it over on our sanitary sewer collection system to where there's tools that can be outfitted on that truck that can be used in tandem with the big jet vac truck that can't be carried on the jet vac truck. So that would be the goal, is to it would still be utilized. I'll put it that way.
You're seeing mostly dogs, I assume, or are there other?
Mostly dogs, cats. We don't get into the wild animals too much for obvious reasons. But yes, typically dogs. And here lately, we've had a number of multiple dogs at the same time. So that's the intent, is to get a unit that can handle more than one animal at the same time and transport.
Did wild animal calls go to the Humane Society then, or?
If it's an emergency, then we'll respond. If it's something my staff can handle, then we'll take care of. Otherwise, we've got a number of contact agencies that we partner with that we can give residents or call directly on.
Other questions for Michael at this point? He'll be back up later.
I don't think we spent anywhere near the original ask for the.
Yeah, I thought about that on my walk over here. I wish I should have looked those numbers up, and I can do that, but you're right. It's nowhere close to what.
And I would say that our relationship with Cedar Valley Humane Society has been top notch. I mean, they're an awesome group, help us out a ton. We give them the information that they need, and at the end of the day, getting the animals back to the owners or finding them a proper home is the goal, and that seems to be what is happening most of the time. So, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, and then the last item under public safety is traffic safety, and again, that's our crossing guards. We don't have anything planned for changes there. So I'll keep moving on and stop me if you have questions. The next page is the fire capital fund, and we're gonna have a more thorough discussion on that at our next council meeting when we talk a little bit more about capital projects. Moving on to public works, the first one, solid waste, is an easy one. This really is, it's an in and out. Obviously, we don't handle garbage collection. That's done by Johnson County Refuse. And so what you're seeing there is an expense, then there's a related revenue on the revenue side. Transit, we've allocated the same amount as we have in previous years, and I just met last week with the mayor to talk a little bit about this, along with our special projects coordinator, Angela McConville, who manages the Yellow Cab NL-TAP program for us. And we're planning to bring some additional information and a little presentation to the city council in February to kind of give an update on how that program is running. And then at that point, we can talk about if any changes need to be made. We think this is a good placeholder for now. And as you can see in FY21, we spent about 123,000. I suspect we'll be in or around that for FY22 as well. And then the last one is streets, and again, you're not seeing any expenses there. So we don't really have a department head associated with this particular page. Any questions or thoughts you want to air out right now?
No, I think that just leave that the way it is, because that gives us enough funds to, as things come up and new ideas and programs can be developed, so.
Okay, I'll move on. Next is health and social services, and this is where we fund our social service programs with the grant applications. We have increased that number from 135 in FY22 to 150 in FY23. We're also proposing to take ARPA funds to fund this portion of the budget. We generally will be accepting applications here shortly, and then have this group come in front, or have the groups come in front of the city council. I think we do that in April, if I'm not mistaken, where you folks can decide and award grant funds to eligible recipients. So I guess the question or thoughts, comments we're looking for you is this number okay, and are you okay using ARPA funds for this particular expense?
Well, I think it's a good use for, this year, as we have the money to use it, we needed to use it for something, and I think these organizations are definitely people who would qualify for that, and according to my understanding of the program and stuff, and then we'd still have money left over that we can work with it later on, so as we kind of see how everything shakes out.
Yeah, we would, and I will elaborate on that a little bit later on a sheet, but yes, that's all accurate.
And we can just assume that some of these organizations will probably have a larger request, depending on how, things went in this past funding cycle. So we have a little wiggle room, like you said.
Generally, I'm okay.
And
with
on that note, do you think it might be prudent just to pencil in or give us a little bit of elbow room with a little bit more of a budget?
Well, Mayor, I guess one question I have for the group is with the $25,000 fund of DVIP, their request last year was $7,000. Are they going to come back with additional on top of the 25 capital campaign for program funding, and are we good with approving that? If not, that's that could be a significant wiggle room area as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I got the impression that was strictly for their new building and capital funding. So I expect we'll probably have some funding request, Counselor, but I don't know. I can't say for sure. I do know that this conversation in April is one of our favorite conversations to have with the public. The only difficult thing with it is that we generally don't quite have the resources in there. And to Counselor Harrington's point, we may see some larger requests this year. So I know that we talked about this back in December. Should we give ourselves a little bit more space in here? This is a process that we're going through in the budget, or do you think 150 is sufficient right now?
If I could jump in just from a logistical standpoint, I would say I don't know that it makes too big of a difference, because regardless, if we spend ARPA money outside of this budget, we're going to have to amend. And we are going to spend at some point ARPA money outside of this budget because it's not included in there. So even if you include this, if you take the 150 out of the ARP money, we're at 2.4 million, I think. So you have from that standpoint, you have a whole lot of wiggle room if you need it. So honestly, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other here, whether you move this number or not.
I would be in favor.
Great point. Thanks.
Oh, sorry, Mayor. I would be in favor to increase it. Because we have those funds. I worry about, down the line when we have to go back and say, hey, we only budgeted for 150,000. And I'm assuming these organizations will probably reach out to other municipalities as well, requesting for funds because majority of them are serving other areas too. So if we were going to increase that, I would say maybe like another $15,000-$20,000, but we have the funds to use, and that's not too far of a setback if we have to go back to 150.
So
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think we don't necessarily have to make that decision tonight, though. I think to Ryan's point, we can cross that bridge when we get there with these conversations in April.
Eric.
So my concern about this is more about the use of the ARPA funds, because I think what we're saying is, we have this extra money, so we're going to give it out. We don't want to spend our own money to do it. And I know that the city has had a history of doing that, giving, money to social services agencies. But I think if we're going to continue to do that year over year, I think that's something that should be included in our general fund and not coming from these funds, because I think we're missing opportunities potentially to do bigger things with them.
So my thought on it was we would just leave it at 150 because that's a good spot for a number, and then we can work on the other things. My fear is, if we have a big, we use some of the ARPA money, and then, we're going to be having our budget is going to be really high, and that's not going to be sustainable in the longer term. So.
And I agree that we always can come back and dive in that portion a little later, because we do need to figure out where those ARPA funds will essentially go.
Yeah, those are all good points. Councilor Stiddig, I think one of the goals that we had with these ARPA funds also was to do well broadly in the community in ways that would help those that need it the most in the community. And we felt that using those ARPA dollars in this category did just that. To Councilor Wason's point about leaving this here as the sustainable budget number, that's probably prudent for us. We've picked this budget number off ourselves for a long time, every single year, and we've set that number and made it part of our budget. So we're probably good to keep it at this 150 range right now, thinking long term.
And I would offer, Eric, that appreciate your point. And as we prepare for our goal setting session in March, that might be a bigger conversation to have there, and we'll still have, depending on, I would assume we'd still have a big chunk of that ARP money remaining to maybe talk more about the bigger idea.
Well, yeah, and I think we need to have a lot of discussions about that. I just have a problem with using those funds for regular operating expenses at this point, because we know we can pay for those. We know we've done it in the past, and we can continue to do it. And if we know there are needs that are not being met even with the funds that we've done in the past, so why aren't we looking at those bigger projects that would help every segment of our society? So that's where I'm coming from, at least. But I look forward to those conversations.
Okay, so I think what I heard as a whole was leave it at 150. Okay. Keep moving on. Culture and recreation. That's another big category here, starting off with library. you'll see the significant change there is restructuring the circulation desk at the front of the library, and included some information from Director Garner in your email today, and of course she's here this evening to elaborate on that if you'd like. Parks, Building and Grounds, we are proposing a new employee for the Parks Department. You might recall this was kind of delayed from last year. Again, we're asking these folks to cover a lot more territory with the additional improvements and additions of roundabouts and other landscaped areas. Guy and his crew take care of all those. And then he's proposing to replace a few pieces of equipment with the gator and a lawn tractor, and then adding an aerator to help with, again, the landscaped areas and our turf grass across the city. I'll say that this equipment number was higher before Guy and I met. He had some other things on his list, but I asked him to scale that down a little bit so we could save a few bucks at least this year. From a recreation standpoint, again, not a lot is changing here. What you're seeing, the $50,000 is the annual allocation for exercise equipment. Every year we, to keep that upstairs fresh and usable, we invest money into replacing equipment up there. No changes in the cemetery budget. Excuse me, I jumped over community center. The capital project there is some acoustical panels in the facility, I think on the library side actually, to help deaden some sound in there. It's the acoustics are not well. And then lastly, the aquatic center, you're not seeing any significant changes there either. So that kind of wraps up culture and recreation. And I saw Jenny step up just a little bit ago, so she is here and willing to answer any questions.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
So,
Jenny, would you mind elaborating a little bit on that question that was asked? And you had a great answer in writing to us as a council on what you'll be doing with this circulation desk. Help to paint that picture for those listening or watching right now.
Sure. I think as we move toward even more trending more and more toward our public service side of things, where we're engaging our public in so many different ways, and particularly this has been on our minds actually since we expanded, because the design was just not as great as it appeared. It's tough to get out from behind that desk, and it creates a barrier to our patrons when we're working there, sitting down. So we want to give it an atmosphere where it feels like we're right there with them, that we're out on the floor working with them all the time. It also gives us the ability to shift the desk area around to create an open space for more programming opportunities and things to happen out on that floor, or to move to where our patrons are. So we could take the circ desk for a time period and shift it over into the kids area. We currently have a youth desk that was a very inexpensive desk that we grabbed that we use during our most busy times. We have someone seated there to help our families and youth who are sitting over there. But I think the biggest thing we've noticed, especially during the pandemic, is the one-on-one assistance that we're being asked to provide. Amy, our adult services librarian, has spent hours and hours basically providing social services in the library, helping people fill out forms that they can't otherwise fill out, and things of that nature, where if we have those desks where they can just approach us and sit and talk to us, we can turn displays so they can see the screen easier. We can work directly with them quickly and efficiently. It will just be a helpful situation. It's also just a trend we see in libraries across the country right now, moving toward this more open space floor plan.
Thank you. I had the same question about the expense for quote unquote a desk, but to hear and read that explanation on what you envision this space to look like, it seems like a bargain to be able to transform it in ways that can be much more helpful to the general public.
Mayor, on the contrary with that though, Guy is back asking for an FTE that was denied last year, or let me back up. Asked by the city manager to scale down again. The cost of that desk is an FTE, and that's the heartburn I have with it.
Yeah, I get that, and I think Jenny said in her presentation that since the library was expanded, they've known that this space.
Mayor?
Mulling this idea over for quite some time as well. I think it both, whether it's another full-time employee or in the library in this way, it's the way to efficiently serve our community. Whether it's comparing these two is not the only needs, but this is a way to be more efficient and more adaptable to our community at the library. I take your point though.
Our community values our culture and recreation without question. I mean, it's $285 per capita for this area, and public safety is at $277. We value it, and we've put a lot of work, planning, effort, and money into this area because that's what our citizens ask for, and that's what the draw is for North Liberty. Is the programming that comes from the recreation programs, our trails, our parks, and all of those types of things. Not to put you on the spot, but you put your department heads on the spot all the time, so I'll do it this one time. What were some of the things that were asked to be cut from Parks and Rec that didn't make the list?
Well, I asked everyone to take a closer look at their services and commodity line item, and so incrementally 10,000 here, 15,000 here, we got to just over 100,000. That's general fund wide.
Okay.
Specifically with Guy, where we kind of picked on him, was he was needing or is needing to down the road at some point replace a. It was a half or a full ton truck, right? A F450, and that came at a cost of about 70,000. So he agreed to delay that. I think that was the big one, right, Guy? Was there? That's the big one. I think that was.
And then on the flip side, for the same question with Jenny, were there things that were asked to take a back seat for the desk to be put in?
Well, in the library's case, they haven't requested, over the years, their requests have been pretty minimal in terms of increases. Same thing, I asked her to take a look at her services and commodities budget. You can see it went up from this year to last only by 10,000. I think prior to my asking, did I ask you to cut 10,000 from it? So 10,000 is what I asked her to cut.
I would just chime in. I think the last time I requested a capital one-time expense may have been when I started as director in 2015.
It's been a while, and I'll say this: Jenny has a great relationship with the Friends of the Library, and they are able to do a lot that you don't see
for sure.
Come through here. She's able to, and they're not $100,000 projects, but there are a lot of $2,000 and $3,000 and $5,000 projects they're able to help with.
We were also thrilled to get about $20,000 in grants written this year so far. We have more outstanding we're waiting to hear about, so working hard to get those dollars where we can.
Yep. So would it be more accurate to say we're not building a $105,000 desk, but we're remodeling?
Correct.
And then even the big area would be movable?
Yes, it's a circular sort of
Right, so
smaller,
it'd
smaller
be able to
circular
move and
space.
out of the road and
And
stuff.
it'll allow more of us to be out there at once if we need to be. Right now, we can only have literally 2 people serving patrons, basically. Somebody else could be off to the side helping, but not with a computer, not doing that work.
So is that, currently it's kind of clunky and it actually takes a big chunk of real estate that behind you. I think at the time it was like, oh, we're going to have all these work project things and
Mhm.
stuff, but that's all back in the back
Yes.
and stuff now. So, and some of these desks are actually more of a mobile workstation is really what they are and stuff. So, and then you'd have to and they'll be able to drive around because, the computers are wireless and they can be laptops and move around and stuff. So, yeah, I guess when you phrase it as a desk, it seems a little odd, but if it's more of a remodel, I don't know. I feel better about a remodel than a so, but the library, I think that, the library, when I started here, you went and checked out books, and then we added cake pans, and stuff. But the library does so much more stuff now for the city than people really realize and stuff. And I think that, I think that I'm okay with that.
You're dating yourself, counselor.
I remember when it was in the fire station.
I was there too. I was 12, but I was there.
So,
And you mentioned that a lot of the work has become social work. I think all of us can kind of speak to that in some kind of form that we're being asked to do. Well, you all are being asked to do a number of additional things, and to continue to have those barriers or feel like, you can't access them or they can't access you and can't help them efficiently. Like you said, to say a renovation of a stationary desk, it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, it just makes it more approachable for everyone.
Yeah.
So they feel like they can walk up to us and we're right there for them.
And to your point about social work, I mean, in theory, you could take some of this budget out of social services because I think we forget that sometimes, but they are doing a lot of that over there and becoming more proactive. And Jenny shared with me just recently an article about was a library in Iowa, right?
Yeah, it's the first library in Iowa, but we've had them across the United States. Davenport Library hired a full-time social worker. We have on our 3rd practicum student, so that's how we're stretching it. We know we can't afford to hire a social worker full-time at the library, but we have our 3rd practicum student in place and going to several trainings. In fact, I'm going to a full day 7-hour training in Portland in April under the same premise of how we adapt and create those spaces for social work to happen in the library.
Well, and that was just my comment to Counselor Sittig. At 105, that's an FTE. So why would that not be better spent on, to your point, social service or additions? With the Rancho House, hopefully, being used the way that this council sees, and we haven't gotten the input of our new colleague here, do you foresee that being helpful in that area and reducing that amount, that workload?
I think it'll change it. I'm not sure it'll reduce it. Right now right now we're giving them all space in the library and multiple times, sometimes, in fact, we're working with the senior center right now to find space 3 or 4 times a month for hours at a time. And storing some of their equipment so that they can come in and do it. So I love that the Rancho House is going to be there. I just, sometimes we're the first point of access, and then they come to us and then we figure out where to connect them. It'll help us partner better and be better collaborators, which we're already doing. I think the numbers of our partners and collaborations have expanded in multitudes the last 2 years with COVID and what we've been able to offer and help with. But I hope it will help with some of that, but I don't think it'll change it dramatically as far as what we're doing in this instance. The other point is the equity piece. If you think about a library, it's the one place left where you can come in and do anything for free and anyone can access it, from a library card to, and mostly we don't even ask you for that. We don't ask you to provide a library card to use most of our services, except for if they're going to take books with you. So it just is add-on value for us to be able to reach our public that way.
I would add that the big difference between this and a full-time employee is this is a one-time expense versus an employee
And
annual.
but I would take it every year if you want to give me a flip over.
Are there needs that you're seeing that are not being met at this point?
As far as from the community to us, or you mean?
Are you seeing things in the library that lead you to believe that there are things that need to be done? I mean, is there a program that you can start? Is there anything else that you feel like you need to do what needs to be done?
So, I mean, if you have a long time, I could tell, we're really excited. We just started a new committee at the library called the JEDI Committee, which is our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. Their work is to look at across the board at from policies through staffing to programming to make sure that we're being equitable and inclusive in all of our programming and creating a place where people walk in and know they belong, or know they just naturally belong in that space. And we're working on a national level with a couple different groups right now and with the University of Iowa, potentially on some grant money that will help us with some social work stuff with a few different, all the libraries in Johnson County. So we're very excited about that. Other than just, having the capacity to provide all the things that people are looking for, our goal is for people to come in and get their questions answered and either provide that service for them or connect them with the people who can. So I look at us as the connectors. We connect people to information. We connect people to people. And sometimes we are that person. We're the person they just need to, which is why we were making those phone calls during COVID to just check up on some of our patrons who we knew were alone. Those are just the great things that we can do in a small town and are still hoping to always be able to do as we grow.
I hope you're able to do that too.
Anything else?
Is the consensus to move forward as it's proposed
With the remodel,
with the remodel? Yes.
I'm okay with it.
That's my bad. I put the info desk there.
I have no issues with this.
I have heartburn. I'll leave it to my colleague to the left.
Well, this is one of those projects that probably I think could use ARPA funds. I mean, it's something it's a one-time thing that we know is going to increase our, the value that we're giving to the people at the library. But I mean, I'm fine taking it out of general fund. That's not a problem for me.
Okay, we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Next up, Guy Goldsmith is here this evening, talk about Parks, Building and Grounds. And as he walked up, I noted earlier, we delayed the full-time position for him last year and have it included in this year's budget.
Good evening.
Okay.
Questions or comments for Guy?
So, and I just wanted to make sure we answered it earlier, but we're just rotating the vehicles out
That is correct.
as before they get
Like the
where they're not
Gator.
worth anything and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
like the Gator's on a 10-year rotation, so the timing is up. The truck has been way past due, and we just keep using it. This holds on, so. But it's a high-ticket item.
That's the one that Ryan mentioned, at 450, or is this a different one?
Yeah, it's the one that we currently have is a F350. We're looking at getting an F450.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Pretty easy.
But that's not included in this budget, right?
That's
It
correct.
is not.
Yep.
It's been kicked a year.
The Gator, the aerator, the 25,000 that we have budgeted for that is based on finding one that's used. A new one is 50,000, so we're gonna have to do some legwork and find a good used one at the time. But really need that for the dog park. It's getting so much traffic. It's getting very compacted, and we're gonna have to do everything we can to keep the turf health going out there. And that's gonna be a key component, is getting that deep tine aerator.
So, Guy, I'm guessing the FTE is more than just a general laborer. So, what's the breakdown for this new person?
Okay, so this person, as you know, we've been gaining a lot of streetscapes, a lot of roundabouts. So we've implemented a second landscaping crew. You can only ask so much of seasonals. You can keep hiring more seasonals, but you actually have to have somebody that can lead them too. So we need another core person here that can have the core knowledge that can actually lead a crew. So we have been getting by on one landscaping crew, one person leading that. We've now gone up to 2. So that's where the focus is right now for this person. Of course, snow removal duties. So we're talking wintertime duties for this person. We keep increasing there, especially with the new admin building going in. There's going to be a lot of additional snow removal there. That's going to have to be basically shuttled out every time it snows. Our duties just keep increasing.
And to be clear, your department takes care of snow removal for all city-owned property, is that right?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. And
trails.
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 And trails.
Trails is
Yeah,
the
we're pushing them over around 30 miles of trails that we clear all of them. Everything is cleared.
How many man hours per snowstorm? What was the last one?
We right now we have an extra person that we kept on that's seasonal. Last year we were pushing like 10 hours for our crew. We're down to about 8 hours now to get over everything.
8 times. How
Yep,
many?
7 people. Yep.
Man hours to get done.
And of course, snow removal, we have priorities. Of course, school, when school's in session, we have to make sure everything that's related to school access, that has to be done right away. The rec center has to be opened up, and police station always has to be kept open. So it's the fire station. So a lot of these things are timely.
So it's Kevin and all of his roundabouts that have made it harder for you?
Well, landscape-wise.
He's not even here.
He will be next week. You can throw
We
him
don't-
under the bus then.
We don't mind taking care of them. We just need the means to do it.
Well, we do appreciate you for taking care of the city, you and your team, and for also making it pretty.
Well, I can't take all the credit. I have a very good crew. I tell Ryan this all the time. I have a very talented crew, very loyal to the department. Couldn't do it without them.
Thank you, Guy.
I just had
Yep.
one more
Thank you.
question, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Back to the truck.
Yep.
You said it's past due. Where are we at with it?
It's a 2006.
Okay, and what would the normal duty cycle for something like that be?
I put it on about an 8 to 10 year cycle. That's something that size. Yep.
And I'll say I appreciate the fact that you reuse so many things and find new ways to use different things. It's very, I'm impressed by you, and I appreciate that.
Well, it's actually fun. It's fun doing it.
Your truck's 3 years newer than Pentecost.
Yeah, that's true. You get me on that one, Michael.
You're welcome, Mike. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Guy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Our recreation director is here tonight, Shelley Simpson, and she actually is in charge of the recreation and aquatic center budget. She also, her and Jenny kind of spearhead the community center budget. You're not seeing a lot of change in any of those, really. But Shelley, if you want to come up and let these folks take their shots, we can. Yeah.
I get the shots this year?
Questions
evening.
for Shelley?
I'll ask how the pool's working.
How's the pool working? It's working. The project's not complete yet with the pool heater. We've got some things still we're working on and closeout stuff. But it's up and running and open to the public, so that's key number 1. Going into that, I would say that's biggest concern I think we have is just the age of that facility and just keeping up and making it look new for the public is kind of one of our key things that we're putting at the top of our list.
And that was kind of my second question, I guess, is how long is this facility going to be useful, or not necessarily useful, but I think we've outgrown it at this point. Is that to some extent?
I think a lot of those answers will be hopefully with the community vision survey and stuff and planning. I think hopefully we'll get some of those ideas on where are we at. Again, it's heavily used facility. We're doing the best we can. What is that key point? I don't know if there is any key formula to go by when it regards to that aspect. I guess one thing I look at, especially down for aquatics, is, is there anything facility-wise can we add that is not needing as much staff? Is what I'm looking at. So like splash pads, I think is a good idea, maybe to offset some of that pressure of the outdoor pool and not have as much staff needed for the splash pads, I think is one thing to look at. So again, it's where are we at and what can we do to offset some of the pressure of our existing facility continues to be our challenge.
And I'll ask kind of the same question I asked Jenny. Are there programs or things that you're seeing that you think you need at this point, or you feel like you're pretty, I mean, are you seeing people coming in asking for things or needing things that you aren't able to provide?
Again, always if the outdoor pool is big enough is always number one. Number two would be probably courts. Again, the luxury of having it all on one site versus use of schools. Again, that hinders a little bit with, do we have enough staff to go off-site if something would be more on-site? Those are the main things that I keep hearing about is, the normal I think everybody hears. But I think we're doing well. Programming-wise, again, with the pandemic, it's kind of been a roller coaster. I think we'll continue to see that. Hopefully we can get back to our, 2018, 19 high programming opportunities. But again, with the ebb and flow of the pandemic, we've started some things back up and then have to dial back down. So we'll continue, I think, to gradually make that impact of continued programming.
So on here, it says to replace exercise equipment. Are you planning to replace like several pieces of equipment, or is that like one or two pieces of equipment?
Each piece of equipment, again, depending on if you're going cardio equipment that we're replacing or the actual weight stations is the two kind of key areas that we look at. Cardio-wise, it's about $5,000 per piece. The weight, some of the lesser ones are like $2,500 approximately per piece to replace. We started this cycle just because we weren't on a good cycle of replacement. We are now, our oldest few pieces of equipment is 2017, where before we were still in the 1980s equipment. So our oldest pieces right now are 2017 that, again, we're on that cycle now every 5 years, kind of trying to definitely keep up within that time frame so we can lessen the time for repairs, downtime, if even the parts are even in service anymore. So that's what we're trying to do, is just have this ongoing cycle to keep that equipment up to date.
And the old equipment, are you able to resell that, or?
Yeah, we work with our different proposals that request, different companies that we get those proposals from. We ask for a value of the equipment that we're turning back in. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. If we don't get a good amount, we might keep it until it dies. It just depends on, and again, with the cycle that we're in, we're getting a better value now because it's not running it to death.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Shelley?
Shelley, I don't have any questions or requests of you specifically, but I do want to offer my thanks for what you have done there at the community center. It is the busiest place in town, and you serve a lot of folks in different ways, whether it's in the summertime outside of the pool or inside there, and especially with the precautions that you all have to take to protect our residents. The fact that your budgetary increases are not significant is extraordinary for the services that you are providing in there. So all of you as department heads have done a great job getting through this last 2 years. the rec center not being a significant budget request difference because of that speaks to the level of service that you're providing. And I'm glad to hear that the newest or the oldest piece of equipment that we have now is 2017, because that was a big deal to start making this an annual contribution, and we've just kind of gotten used to it. So I'm very thankful to hear that as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shelley.
Thanks.
The last category on this page is cemetery, and this is just a cost share with the township, mainly for mowing and other maintenance at the cemetery. So unless there are other questions on culture and recreation, I'll move ahead. Community and economic development. Three categories really here that deserve some attention. One is economic development. You'll notice an increase here. We're proposing that Nick and his team with Summer Slate, Blues and Barbecue, Beat the Bitter are requesting a total city contribution this year of $50,000, and so, or excuse me, $45,000 is what we're looking at. So we're proposing 30 from here and 15 from Hotel Motel, and we would propose that going forward for these events. Nick can speak to this, but last year's Summer Slate was very successful. Some of the community survey results that we received, folks really enjoyed. It appears that folks want the one-day Blues and Barbecue event, but they also like the events spread out throughout the year to have entertainment and activity in North Liberty. Otherwise, no other increases are proposed in some of these other contributions to ICAD, UNESCO, and the Entrepreneurial Development Center. The one that I'm sure you've all been waiting to hear about, planning and zoning. Russ over here is excited to talk about it. No significant changes there. We'll note that we're in the process of the comprehensive plan update, which was funded with last year's fund balance allocation. And then lastly, in this category, communications, I think I noted in my opening memo that we funded half of the outreach and equity coordinator position last year. So no, that full position is coming online. So that's why you're seeing the bump there. And then a little bit of an increase in services and commodities to give, I think Nick called it a runway to Micah, who's our outreach and equity coordinator, to get some programming up and going. So with that, I would, well, let me ask, are there any questions or comments on the economic development standpoint? I can take that one.
So the comment in my email was, again, looking at ARPA funds and business development, if that entrepreneurial center, you know, they provide quite a bit to business owners here, you know, and that's something we can have conversations with down the road too. But I would be in favor of seeing an increase, a one-time increase with that. But we can hit that in future discussions.
Fair enough.
Maybe they have an idea they can come and talk to us about.
Okay, how about planning and zoning? Any? Pretty straightforward there. Sorry, Russ.
Always the boring one.
Yeah. How about communications? Nick is also here this evening.
Nick, you guys have a lot of technology. I'm a little surprised at the low amount for the replacement. Now, is that just your IT guy saying you need 1,900 worth of new computers?
So as I said to Ryan, you know, we're probably not buying big video automation servers going forward, right? The actual channel piece that we do with 24-hour automated playback is not, it's not our bread and butter, right? YouTube exists. We still have the technology to do media, meeting streaming and all of that. But that's our big expensive piece of technology. We'll look at some stuff that'll go into the new city hall as far as digital signage, but you can get a pretty reasonable laptop that does video editing. So we have a lot of it, but we just don't, we don't have F450s or other really big ticket items.
Derek doesn't want one of those articulating camera.
Derek wants lots of things,
like NFL
but
cameramen have.
He wants many things. But we try to be reasonable.
No mirrorless cameras yet.
Not yet.
Are you able to share anything about how Micah's first, 6 months?
So Mike has started the beginning of November. So Mike has been with us just over 2 months. And Micah is digging deep into sort of best practices as she's working with the library on Jedi. She's doing work to so we can launch youth council coming up we're planning to launch that concurrent with the school year in the fall. So to do some of that groundwork now that we have, we're able to do that in the fall, as well as working on city slate programming. So working with seniors, working and trying to, again, I've said before that inclusion, diversity, these pieces are it's everybody's job, but it's also really, really helpful to have somebody whose job it is to help us. So that's what she's up to right now. She's sort of got some buckets that she's sort of approaching the community center with, looking at making sure it's inclusive, right? So we're talking about how do we make sure that folks can access our programming, right? What are those fees? What is that financial aid? Making sure that we have a catalog of accommodations that we can make. If somebody reaches out and says, hey, I can't do this event unless you provide X, how do we provide that? Making sure that there is awareness of the programs we offer, right? People won't use them if they're not aware. Really helping to make sure that we've got good policies, making sure that people can figure out transportation options so that people can get to our programs and get to the community center, as well as then some programming opportunities. We're hoping, we're sort of in a little bit of a holding pattern to do some bigger senior dining options that'll be for the community and be all paid. Our first we're hoping we have one scheduled for February 5th. We think that might not be the best time to have a big indoor eating gathering at the community center. So we're going to sort of downplay that a little bit, but we will come back to that in the spring or summer.
And how about the ambassadors program? How's that going?
I think the ambassadors program is going really well. We've got some ambassadors who are integrating into other things. A couple who are serving on the advisory committee for the comp plan update, for example. They're coming to their meetings. They're asking good questions. I think we're going to continue to recruit, and we need to continue to figure out how do we build those relationships so that it's not just a come join this thing, that people see the value sort of on the front end before they're willing to say I'm in, but we're happy with where it's at. We've got a plan for this year. They want to do service projects, so we want to sort of figure out how do we empower them to do something that they're excited about, as well as how do we make sure that they continue to feel engaged and special.
Great, thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, the last general fund category is general government. First item is mayor and council. This is a line item where we pay you folks from. So no significant changes there. Administration, again, we're not seeing any significant changes. We have to accommodate for a small lease payment increase that we accommodate for every year, but really no big changes there. No election this year in FY, at least not one planned in FY23. Of course, we'll have two in FY22. Legal and tort. Grant, are you on the phone?
I sure am.
Okay, well, Grant is here if we have any questions for him, although this is, again, a pretty straightforward, almost as boring as the planning budget. Personnel, really no significant changes there. This is a line item where we take all of our, any sort of training or activity that benefits the staff in its entirety is paid for out of this fund versus a department fund. And then lastly, we included a new category or a new subcategory of information technology. And we're actually, our new budgeting software, as a result of that, we've added this, and as a result of our new IT person. And so we're going to actually start entering expenditures in there in FY23 on the software to kind of give us an idea of what that will be in future years. In theory, it will not necessarily add to the budget. It'll just take away from expense lines in department budgets and go to the IT budget. So that subcategory will build itself over the next as we move ahead with this model. So that is general government. Any questions on any of this? Okay, if not, I'm gonna, the next page, we talk about the general fund balance, policy allocation, and the American Rescue Plan Act allocation. We've kind of talked about that a little bit over the last hour or so. I want to just jump quickly to the general fund revenues, just so you can get a snapshot of that. And what I would point out here, I think probably the biggest change is that the very bottom line is the backfill, and you can see we've included in there the elimination of that. So by FY27, that number will be 0. If you certainly, I'd be happy to try to answer any specific questions on the revenues. Tracy does the lion's share of the work, and she is on the phone, by the way, on kind of estimating those revenues for the new fiscal year. And then if you flip the page one more time or scroll down, you'll see the summary of the general fund. And this is basically everything we just talked about. And you have the revenues, you have the expenditures. We have a deficit this year of nearly $1 million, which is a big number. And as I noted in my memo and again today in the email, what we're proposing to do is use our surplus from FY21 as well as $150,000 in ARP funds. And generally, we have used the fund balance for one-time expenses. Given what I kind of outlined as the perfect storm this year, I'm recommending that we also use a portion of them this year for operating funds and look to make up that difference in the years to come with the potential for growth, as well as not being impacted by the rollback as much, at least, as we were this year. So, and given the fact that we budget conservatively and our management team has a very good budget IQ, and you can see that over the years, I'm confident that this makes sense for us. So the last thing I would offer before any final questions on the general fund is even by using the 800 and 900 and some $1,000 in revenues or in surplus funds, we're still going to have about $700,000, $750,000 that needs to be allocated either to a project or a program. And I threw some ideas down there. We'll talk more about that next time. These were just ideas to spark a conversation. We can get into those weeds when we talk more about capital projects. So with that, maybe I'll stop there and see what questions or concerns or comments you might have on the outlook of the general fund.
Is that 150,000 in ARPA? That was where you put it into the social service?
Yes.
So Ryan and Mara, I'll include you in this question. What significant debt are we concerned about that we have to take on looking ahead in the next three fiscal years? Police station's online, right? We've got the idea of what the operational funds are for that facility.
Yes.
What's additional stressors that we're looking at? Why are we going from 991 to 2.3 and 25?
Oh, yeah, don't take a look at those numbers don't mean a whole lot right now. We haven't fine-tuned those later years.
Okay.
So you can disregard. Plus, these generally, it's a little difficult. I mean, it's extremely difficult to project out that far. This is an absolute worst case scenario. We won't be there. We just wouldn't get ourselves into that.
Okay.
I think to your question though, the stressors, just in my mind, will be the continuing as we continue to grow, continuing need for additional employees. I think if we move forward with a city hall and a fire station in the next 3 to 5 years, both of those, we'll have that debt coming online, and then we don't. And as you all know, I stay as far away from the political stuff as possible, but I think this is a fair statement. We don't know what the state's going to do in terms of continuing to dwindle home rule and the city's ability to generate revenues. And there's been some negative impacts on cities across Iowa because of that, and I think that'll be something we have to pay attention to. All that said, we are better off than more than the majority of cities in Iowa, financially.
I appreciate what you do, Ryan, and all your staff and all the department heads. You put a lot of work into this. What doesn't track for me in this budget is why we are decreasing our levy by 20, or proposing to decrease our levy by 20 cents per thousand, and then pulling money out of reserves to make up for deficits. I just don't. It just doesn't track.
Well, a couple things. That's a fair question. I think the how I kind of look at it is we have set a reserve policy of we have to keep 30% of our revenues in a reserve, and so we have that. We have that consistently every year. We have more than that, and year ending FY25, we're closer to I think 40. I can't find that percentage, but yeah, 40%. And so we're sitting here with an extra $1.5 million. Why raise taxes when we have that money that needs to be assigned? I mean, we could certainly, but then, and use that money for other projects, but we have it sitting there now. And so that's really a political question. If you want to keep the tax rate the same, we could do that and generate additional general fund money. Now, the other caveat in here is, and you probably saw a piece about this late last year, our tax levy is at 1151, I believe it is. It should have been 1132, thereabouts. But because of a reporting error on our end, our staff's end, or my end, I'll say, that didn't happen, and so this budget also factors in the fact that we're taking that 200,000 plus interest plus some additional cash on hand that has to be used for debt and buying down the debt service levy. We can't take that money and use it somewhere else. It has to be used for debt service, and so we're able to buy that down. So when you look at it, gets a little confusing, and you've been around local government long enough that you know it's confusing. The general fund levy actually is staying the same. What's going to reduce is the debt service levy, because that's where that 200,000 and change has to be allocated.
And overcharge, essentially.
That's your word, sure.
Because it was agreed at 11:32
Yeah.
and it was charged at 11:53.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did that answer your question, Eric?
I mean, that's the answer I'm gonna get, so. I mean,
Happy to talk more about it offline too, Eric.
Yeah, no, and we may.
Yep, same here.
Okay. Well, I think we'll move ahead here. I'm not seeing any significant objections. We have a few things to fine tune, and we'll bring that back next week also. Okay, so I'm going to skip we're skipping a couple pages here, including the franchise fee fund. We'll spend some time on that next week. We're going to move ahead to road use tax fund, where you'll get to hear from Michael again. A couple things I want to point out in this model. Our FY21 revenues came in much higher than we anticipated, almost $500,000, or maybe even better than $500,000. And that was because the per capita rate was higher than what we budgeted for. It was higher than what the state's original projection was. And so you can see, if you take a look at the FY21 year and you see the funding per capita was $124.25. That's kind of those second and third columns down, or rows down. And then you see that drastically reduce the following year. And that's because those, again, are the numbers that the state gave us to put in there. Even when the new census data came out, they told us what those numbers we should budget for, and that's what we do. Oftentimes, we get more revenue in than what they projected, but that's okay. So then, just looking at the budget in general, you can see this fund is in great shape. We continue to make transfers over to the street revolving, or the street repair fund for projects. This year, Michael is requesting a couple of pieces of, one significant piece of equipment. That's a new dump truck with snow equipment at the tune of $260,000, and then sign making equipment at $60,000. And Michael can talk about this, but with the Iowa prison industries changing up their processes, it's really hampered us in getting signage. So I'll stop there, and Michael dazzle you. Questions for Michael?
Well, first, thank you for everybody for getting the streets plowed. I had somebody stop me at work and said that they couldn't believe how good the streets were coming down Front Street when it snowed the first time, and then when they got out of North Liberty on Front Street, that it was like, oh, this is not good. What happened? So they're very impressed. So
Thank you.
So are we gonna make our own stop signs and stuff? Is that what?
So that's what I've been toying with this idea for quite some time. Currently, we outsource our sign production, whether it is street IDs, speed signs, anything that you see on the streets. And with the incident that happened at the Anamosa prison, that's where we get our signs made and shipped and ordered from. They're the cheapest, and they're a high quality made, but they're cheapest for obvious reasons of how they're made. So with the incident there, we've experienced very long lead times in getting signs up and installed. When derecho went through, when we have a car accident, take down a street ID, we could be looking at upwards up to 2 to 3 months to get those signs produced and made and back. On a typical no parking, it's probably not that big of a deal, but we try and keep a good inventory of speed signs, stop signs. I can only keep so many street ID signs. I can't have an inventory of every street ID in town. So this, what I'm asking for here is this would give us the ability to have a more efficient, a better response to those times that when we have incidents or just in general maintenance of keeping up with signs that are faded or we can produce them in-house and get them installed better, faster.
Is it kind of to print them? Is it
So-
print on the steel or?
Yep, so it would be aluminum sheets that are pre-sized. So a 35-mile-an-hour sign, it would be a blank template, and then you would print that, adhere that. It gets a protective UV cover over it, and as long as you've got the stock, you can do and print whatever you need.
Will we notice any difference in the look of the signs as
No.
you start intermixing them with what you already have out?
No, nope. The really the thing that strimmed this was the incident earlier this year, and so I feel like we can provide a better service by purchasing this equipment, and that's kind of my goal of it. But you can't always buy everything that you want to produce in-house. We're not going to buy a pavement maker to do 965. It just doesn't make sense. In this case, I think it makes sense, and it's an item that can be used for years and years and years.
Is this something that all your staff will be trained on, or is it a special?
Yes. So I have a staff of 9, including me, and this would be something that we would train everybody on to be able to use.
And cost-wise, how much will this save you?
That's a good question. So you're still going to have the raw material. You're still going to have the stock. So your savings, I believe, would save down the road long term. I think the thing you're going to notice most is the efficiency and the timeliness of getting them installed in a quicker manner. So long term, I think you would save, but that isn't the driving force necessarily on this purchase. Yeah. Yep.
Do you foresee any requests from area partners, other cities requesting help from you?
So we visited another city and looked at their facility to see how that was done. I do anticipate that the other city was not, they weren't interested in producing on a scale for other entities for obvious reasons. I mean, they've got infrastructure money put into this system. If they're going to produce them for another city, it's going to cost you, and that's what the case was in this particular city. So I can't blame them, but no, I don't. To answer your question, I don't anticipate billing another city to build their signs. That's not the goal of this. Now, in-house, if we have maybe Nick with communications has stuff going on that they need signage, or Parks has stuff going on. I mean, this can be used by other entities within the city to use those tools.
And it has the capability to do your own design?
That's correct.
Guy's got half a barn worth of no parking signs. They're terrible. They look awful.
Well, one thing that we did this last year for city cleanup was we had sign production made. We had signs made because of COVID and trying to coordinate everything going on down at the street shop, keep everybody informed. This would be one avenue for that. Another thing that I was thinking is, every year we have issues with contractors plowing streets, their private parking lots out into the street and piling them up on the other side of the street. Well, we know those locations. We know where they're going to go. We could in the fall stick some signs up there letting them know that it's illegal to do that. We don't want them to do that, and then remove them come spring. So there's a lot of options I think this provides us for. It's $60,000. It's a lot of money, but I think it gives us a lot of options for that money.
Michael, I can't speak for council, but I got to say this was the surprise of the night. This is a cool piece of equipment.
Yeah, it's very neat. I'm not tech savvy, so I'll probably need some help when we get started on it. But We've been assured from the various vendors that we've talked to so far, that shouldn't be a problem, so.
Maybe that's something Nick can cover
There
so
you
that
go.
the community can know how fancy of equipment that is that's being used.
There you go. Like the Brine Extreme 2000.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Michael?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, Michael, you want to just stay up here because we're going to chat about
Sure.
stormwater quick, and one of those requests is
Yep.
from Michael here. But you'll see, and I noted in my memo, the stormwater utility does need some attention if we plan to move forward with capital projects. And we've talked about now for a couple years of updating the structure, and Russ and his team are working on some GIS data actually right now that hopefully we'll have a proposal to you here mid-year. But in the meantime, we're proposing what you see in front of you is the FY23 budget. However, as I noted again in my memo, if the rates don't change or the rate structure doesn't change, we would have to hold off on the capital projects that are being proposed here, that are the Liberty Center Pond and the Muddy Creek flood control projects that are included in here. Also being requested is to replace our current stormwater coordinator's vehicle, a truck, and that also would probably have to be delayed if we're not looking to make some changes here. That said, I'll leave it at that, and if you have questions for Michael or I, fire away.
I know as we've gotten bigger, that the stormwater requirements that we have to make for the state, based on regulations and stuff, it's really gone up quite a bit. And stuff. I'm surprised that we're able to do as much as we can with the 2 1/4 or whatever it is now. So, and that doesn't seem to be particularly fairly balanced out, because I think some people have a lot of problems and a lot of people don't have much. So I think probably trying to come up with a better idea, like we've talked about, of kind of distributing the costs of those things a little more equitably is going to be a good idea.
On most heavy rain events, his staff and the whole park staff are out digging stuff out by hand. I mean, it's not, it's terrible and not sustainable. My question on the ARPA funds was, I know we've talked about the fee structure and that has to be addressed. I just don't, why are we looking at the ARPA funds up front before we're ready on a fee structure? Are there 2 big projects that we think need to be done right now?
Stormwater projects, you mean?
Stormwater.
Well, I think
Ed, you said-
any of the Muddy Creek silt-in projects are critical projects. I think those are, they have been building over the years, right? So we've seen erosion measures that have become more strict over time and have helped, but that wasn't always the case in the building of North Liberty, right? There has been requirements that have gone in place to help that, and that during the boom time in North Liberty, those requirements weren't in place. So we see that silt, we see that sedimentation, and it's noticeable on those bridges and those locations.
And I think to your question about, why the GIS project, I'm glad Michael's up here, and I know Greg's pretty fond of the new product we have for water and wastewater. And the most expensive piece of that is the stormwater component, because there are so many pieces to be identified. But I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Tell us how you feel about that the GIS data.
So the GIS part of it, I use it for our sanitary sewer collection system, and then my locating department uses it for all the utilities to mark those out when a contractor calls in to locate, make sure those utilities aren't hit. So far, it's been unbelievable, to say the least. You can, we had a sewer plug. It was, I think, right before Thanksgiving, over by Ace Hardware, in a rural, remote area in the woods that.
Behind my house.
Yes, yes, and in an area that you don't, if you're not walking across it and stumble on it, you're not going to find it. And this tool proves invaluable in those situations. Not to mention just the ability to track our service and maintenance records on a format that's usable. We use it with our engineering firm as far as projects and gathering data and giving that data to them on when they're designing different sanitary sewer projects. So I'm a huge fan of it. I know Ryan's used it a bunch in his field. I know Greg and his team are expanding upon it. We're expanding upon it internally with the fiber network and the electric network. So on the stormwater side of it, Ryan's correct. There's so many more structures on the stormwater side of it, and that's where the big cost is. You've got all the ADS tiles and the big storm pipes and all the intakes, and there's just a lot there. And for a proper system to work efficiently, you need all those structures GIS map, not just some on PDF and some on a GIS system. So we're working with them both right now, and we'll continue to do what we need to do and can do, but it definitely is eye-opening what the mapping system can do.
That's why you're seeing it.
Or
as a
how
priority.
close are we to the fee structure hitting council?
So we're hoping to, I mean, this is an extremely labor intensive project. This is probably, we're moving on a couple of years and it's literally hand drawing. You know, I've got some raw data from the county and then manipulating that, but we hope to be done by, I told Ryan we should be done by, hopefully by the end of this month. That's being optimistic, but we're pushing for kind of a draft, and then we've got to get in and kind of refine it to make sure it's correct. You know, match up with assessor data and things like that. So we're kind of preparing for that, but we're getting close.
And that's figuring raw space of concrete per
It's building coverage.
property.
Yeah, it's building coverage, parking lot, basically impervious surface area.
I hope by July we'll be able to have some of these discussions.
We're going to push to get ready for that. It's very labor intensive.
And some of the ARPA money was actually money that was set available to the city to replace lost revenues for other things. So
Yes.
really, this would be something that's kind of in that area. I mean, it's not that it's divided out anyway, but you know.
That's right, totally understand the question, Brian, but I would say that there was no lost stormwater revenue.
Right, but just the city overall revenue.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
so we can use some of that money to projects that benefit the city, and so this will
Correct.
be useful, so.
We can, plus essentially any water, wastewater, or stormwater project is also eligible, in addition to the lost revenue. Okay, so looking at this model, knowing that we're hopefully bringing something forward, and until we do, we're going to tap the brakes on the capital projects. Any other thoughts or concerns? Okay, I will move forward. Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
Thank you.
Next up is wastewater, and I believe Drew, if he hung on this long, is still on the phone. Drew, are you with us?
Good evening. Good evening.
Hello.
Great, thanks for
Can you hear
being.
me?
Yes, we can, Drew. I'll walk through this and then give the folks an opportunity to ask you some questions here. Not a lot of changes in wastewater. You're seeing a 0% proposed rate increase. To the right, you're seeing a couple of the projects that Drew and his team and Michael are working on, as Michael noted, the collection system of wastewater or sanitary sewer. Michael takes care of. Drew and his team take care of everything internally at the plant. So we have 70,000 budgeted for manhole rehab and 100,000 for some sewer work along Ranshaw Way, improvements to existing sewer. And then Drew has $50,000 budgeted for phosphate reduction, and I'm sure he would love to dive into the weeds on that with you. You've seen now for a lot of years that we've set aside money for membrane replacement. That'll be a continuing expense as long as we operate this plant. We've noted here that we have 5 cassettes being replaced in FY23. So we've saved up all those years. We have that money on hand, and that'll be spent. And then it's time to replace our crane truck that helps us gain access to a lot of the heavy pumps and equipment at lift stations and at the plant. We are showing a deficit this year of $275,000. I'll remind the group, while the next few years look alarming, when you look at our ending fund balance, we have planned for this. That's been part of the plan. We're sitting pretty good right now. So one final comment just on the debt service coverage. As you all know, that's an important piece of this because by law and the agreements we have with our lenders on revenue bonds, we're required to have a certain amount of coverage. You can see there it's basically 120%, and we exceed that in every year. So we're sitting pretty good there. Okay, with that, questions for Drew or myself?
Drew, remind us how much longer you've been able to make these cassettes last with the process and the clean out that you're doing with your crews. I know there's been a number of cities come here and look at your process and look at what you guys do. Just to remind us how much we've saved doing that.
Sure. Well, not only just the membrane inspections and the cleaning that's taking care of this, really, the way that we're replacing these has kind of become a big role in the longevity and the life of these things. Originally slated when these things were purchased in 2008 and put in service, they were meant to last what we were told 10-year life expectancy. So that's the reason why we're setting aside all this money for these years. In anticipation, we thought in 2018 we were going to have to replace all of our membranes. And when we took a closer look at it and we looked at all of our performance data and all the inspections that we've been doing and all the cleanings, we didn't see that need to actually go forward with those replacements. Now, that does kind of bring up a risk versus cost for us. So what we decided to do, instead of just doing full complete replacements, is we started to stagger this out where we're gonna push these things a little bit longer. And now we're at a point where we've done 2 replacements. We've done a replacement on one train at 12 years, another one at 13, and we will stagger the third one here for this. I'll call it a phase 1 of our original 12 cassettes. That'll be at 14 years. So now this gives us some redundancy, and it also gave us the ability to take the original cassettes and instead of just throwing them out, what we did was repopulated open spaces within our trains to actually increase our capacity, which isn't necessarily needed, but what it does give us as a benefit is it reduces all the stress on all the other membranes operating. So it increases the life even that much more, hopefully. So, we did replace the 3 original trains. We have one train that, our 4th train that went online in 2016. We are hoping to get more years of service out of these. And with that, we did hang on to 2 original cassettes, or we're going to, and use those as a control on the test cassette. And we're going to try and get upwards, we're going to try and push that 20-year mark on those and see see where they start to degrade in either performance or actually just have equipment failure with them.
So, Drew, are there any other
Good.
things we're gonna have to start worrying about as far as requirements from the state? You know, I know phosphorus reduction is coming up, and is there anything else that's gonna pop up on us, or?
Well, we're sitting with our NPDS. We got really lucky with our chlorides. You know, with the new water plant going online, we were able to test our raw water. Luckily, our chloride's been reduced to a point where we don't need to monitor and test for them. So that got removed from our permit, which is kind of unique for them to take things off of our permit. But yeah, you're right with nutrients. That's kind of been a big topic, and our plant's always been great at removing nitrogen. Phosphorus is the one that it's kind of it's the tricky one for all facilities, and it's different for all facilities on how that process works. At certain times of the year, summertime, it's a little tricky for us to remove phosphorus down to a limit that I think that they're probably going to give us a regulation on coming up. Right now in the wintertime, we're doing great at we operate essentially the same way, but just with temperature changes and the way microbiology works, we just get much better treatment for phosphorus in the wintertime. That's why you'll see this request for the phosphorus reduction. What it is, it's an analyzer, and it's not really equipment that's going to remove phosphorus. What it's going to do is it's going to give us more data. It's going to give us real-time live data of when that phosphorus is making an increase, and we can look at all of our other data parameters that we're tracking in real time at the plant or through samples, and try and correlate those ebbs and flows in that phosphorus reduction or when it increases, and be able to treat accordingly. So we're just trying to stay on the forefront, and you know, we've really had good luck being up. There's anybody regulating, or even our permit writer, and saying, here's what we've tested, here's all of our numbers, this is what I think we can do, this is what I think we can't do, and it's really worked out well for us. So that we're hoping that equipment will just be a really good tool for us to be able to track phosphorus a little better and make some more informed operational decisions.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Drew? Nice work, Drew. You've left everyone here clamoring for more. I'm sure we'll get that at a department head meeting coming up, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Last one for the night. Greg always gets to go last, I guess. And that is the water utility budget. And what's unique here is I've included two separate models in your packet. One showing what we've projected for quite some time now, rate increases for the next 2 years at 2%, and one showing no rate increases in those 2 years. And when you look at the ending fund balances, we're sitting okay, at least in the short term, without those rate increases. It's in the long term where it obviously it compounds over time, and those deficits, annual deficits, get a little larger and a little harder to swallow. That said, we have not, when we talked about the ARP money, I think late last year, we talked about let's find a water project where we can hold rates steady. We will look into that a little bit more here to see how we can keep those rates from going up, if that's still the prerogative of this group. Until then, obviously, we don't have to make any recommendations on rate increases until May. We'll have information to you well in advance of that. And the operating budget here is actually pretty straightforward. You're not seeing a whole lot of changes on here. The two capital projects that Greg has in the budget this year, the first is one we've seen in previous years, like the wastewater plant, the water plant has membranes also, and so we're setting aside money for those replacements. And then we need to replace the roof at the old water plant that we still use for operations. Other than that, you're not seeing you're seeing very little changes. So I will turn it over to you folks to ask Greg any questions you might have.
What did we do with the old water plant?
So right now it's just being used for storage, but it still houses the electric for well number 5 and the generator for well 5. So that building will have to remain there.
Is there space in there? That big salt tank is gone?
It is. Yep. Yeah, everything's been removed from there. We've got meter storage up there right now, and some things we probably should get rid of that are still hanging around, but all the electrical cabinets and things that we didn't need from the old process are gone and removed. So.
No derecho insurance claim on the roof. It's just
No,
old.
you know, we looked over all the facilities after that happened, and we did have a couple of them that had that problem. This is just sheer. I think that roof was put in 2000, and it's to its end of life. So.
Any questions for Greg?
What kind of roof is it?
It's asphalt shingles. So they're on there. Yep. Yeah, I was in actually from the derecho when we got up there and took a look at it. It was a lot worse than I had thought it was. So we originally didn't have this in there and worked it in, but it's definitely there. I will add a little bit on the GIS to what Michael said. As far as I'm concerned, I think I thank the council for being behind the investment in that process. Hands down, probably, excuse me, one of the best tools that we have at our disposal. And we're finding new ways to use it every day. We can create work orders. When we were out doing hydrant flushing, we discovered that we can go in and actually mark out areas that we flushed, the day, the time, record all of that information in there, which helps when, you know, you have 1 or 2 people out there flushing hydrants and they're gone the next day and you send somebody else out, they can go to that map and actually see right where they were at. Any repairs that are done out in the system, now that we have the equipment to go out and survey our own items, we're able to put those on there. Going forward, I don't know how familiar you are with the revised lead and copper rule that's moving forward. It's going to have a big impact. I think October of 24, we have to have our entire system inventoried for service lines. So we have to go out and mark whether they're plastic, copper, lead, galvanized, or unknown. And if they are unknown, they're considered lead, which triggers sampling and a number of other costs and things going forward. So we are out actively marking out services right now. We're trying to knock out the ones that we have information on, that we know what they are. And the next phase of that, we'll be out there trying to discover, you know, what we can on what's buried in the ground. So that is mandatory by EPA. Everybody in the United States is gonna have that going forward. It's going to be a long process. This is just another tool that helps us move forward there.
Is that post-Detroit issues that drove that?
Yeah. It's been kicked around for quite a while. In fact, it was finalized under the last administration, and then since administration changed, they put a hold on it until December 16th. Of 21, and then they moved forward with it as it was written. I think there were a few changes, but the biggest piece of that is inventory right now. We have until October 24 to get that in place. The good thing is, in all the years I've been here, I have never seen a lead service line in North Liberty anywhere, but we have to be able to document that and show that. So. It just really, I can tell you, I have not looked at a paper map of our distribution system since the day I got my password to get on there. It just, for the operators, anybody working in the distribution system, you know, prior to having that, you'd go through and you may have to look in several different locations to find the information you're looking for, and then a lot of times the information you looked at was not accurate. This, when you bring it up on the screen, you know that someone has physically touched that. It's there. What you're seeing is real time. And it just, you know, it saves time. It saves frustration. You know, some of these things are like searching for a needle in a haystack, just like Michael was talking about trying to find a manhole out in a field. You know, we have that stuff all over as well. It just, phenomenal. I can't tell you how thankful we are to have it. So. And the ability to keep it up to date. You know, a lot of communities put the GIS in place, but they don't buy the surveying equipment to go out and make changes and you know, survey things as things get moved. Well, if that data is only as good as what's on the GIS, so my guys are confident now when they go out and they look at that and they move forward on a project that it's laid out the way that it is on the map. So it's great.
Anything else for Greg? Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so that wraps up the presentation of the operational budget. I think I noted in my email today a wrong date a couple times. I think I said the 26th, but our next meeting is, as you all know, the 25th, a week from tonight. And at that time, we will we'll obviously have our regular meeting, but we're hoping to start that at 6 o'clock next week to accommodate some additional time for the budget to talk about our capital projects and moving forward with those. Any final questions for me or anyone on our team here tonight that you didn't get answered, at least at this point?
No, but I appreciate y'all sticking through all this stuff. And I know, I think Robbie Ryan tells you, and I think we try to tell you that, you know, I think the council, we all recognize that you guys all do a super excellent job, you know, and I tell people where I'm, you know, from North Liberty and stuff, and it's, you know, people tell us how they do things in their cities and stuff, and I said, well, yeah, I gotta talk to our guys because they have some really cool ideas, you know, I mean, making your own street signs, you know, I still tell people about the bug catcher things that guy made and stuff, you know, and then the wastewater treatment plant that went and figured out how to make those steel parts that they were doing that were like $10,000 a piece less than what they wanted to sell them to us for and stuff. So, and that's the reason why, you know, we've been able to keep, you know, things down budget wise as best we can, and then we're kind of collectively kind of miserly a little bit, but we try to do the best we can with you. We appreciate you guys. So
That's refreshing, the work that you guys put in as a team before you even come into chamber. Obviously, taking the nose from the boss probably isn't fun, and sitting down as a group. But the way that you guys prioritize the necessities and what's needed, and the way that you make do when you're told no, it really is phenomenal. And, you know, from my eyes and comments that I hear all the time, the way that you all work together as a team, as a leadership team, is impressive. And that teamwork is what is presenting a budget like this to citizens that's a lot more palatable than some communities near us. So thank you.
And I couldn't agree with them more. You all have done phenomenal, and it's always, you know, it's exciting, and we get to hear about the changes that you've gone back in and made and adjustments. But what's presented before us, we understand that it's going to benefit our community as a whole, and it's going to continue to allow us to be very proud of living here and being a part of it. So definitely appreciate all the work that you all put forth as department heads and the staff and teams that you all have working alongside you. So thank you.
Ditto.
Mayor, I think
I'll just, yeah,
it's up to you.
I'll just add here real quick, Ryan, that council members, I don't think any of you realize what Tracy and Ryan have been dealing with over the last couple of weeks or longer with the new financial software. So a tip of the hat to those two. All of you department heads, you're interacting with that software and the patients. And just as has been said, the amount of work, and I think it was Guy who said he enjoyed the process of finding ways to not spend money or to be creative in those ways. And I think you all have that same bug. So we're very fortunate to have you on that team. So Ryan, I think you were going to say there's nothing left on our agenda.
Yes, I was going to turn it over to you for the most important part of tonight.
That is hopefully what I'm about to say. Everyone, thank you for what you've done and for your time tonight, for the questions and for the preparation. And with that, let us adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.